Critical Consulting and IFING Media Limited organizes this webinar, Team 10 Years of Pioneering Islamic Banking in Nigeria, Issues and Prospects. Speakers for this webinar were carefully selected based on their experiences and resourcefulness, with a high anticipation that they will do justice to the respective topics given to them. The speakers are Dr. Muhammad Ziyad, Assistant Professor at INSEF, Malam Muhammad Wadamu Azulere, former Director at the Central Bank of Nigeria, Professor Abdulrazak Abdulmajid Alaro, Member of the Financial Regulations Advisory Council of Experts of the Central Bank, and Malam Abdul Qadir Abbas, Director at the Securities and Exchange Commission. But before we start with the presentations, let's have an introductory, a welcome address by the MD and CEO of Jaiz Bank, Malam Hassan Usman. Malam Hassan Usman, tafaddal mashkuran.
Okay, Malam Adam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wa salamu ala rasulil kareem wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Okay. It's a great privilege and pleasure for me to welcome you first the speakers and all the family. It's coming. Yes, 10 years is what we are celebrating in Jaiz. Alhamdulillah. We give glory to for Muslim community to have an alternative to conventional banking, so that they can live their banking finance life in accordance with the Creator's will and dictation. For us and many of the participants today, I believe it's an occasion, yes, to share and to continue to reinforce the awareness of non-interest banking or Islamic finance in Nigeria and Africa. But to also thank God and express our gratitude to Him, because He has promised that if we are thankful, He will even do more for us. And indeed, we need more, because the journey to Islamic finance in Nigeria and in Africa is just beginning. Nigeria requires significant amount of funding to grow the economy, to get us out of poverty. And I think that Islamic finance stands a very high chance of doing that if it is encouraged. It also focused around the fact that it is, yes, society well-being is taken care of. So while continuously expressing our gratitude to the Almighty and for not only bringing the possibility for us to do Islamic finance in Nigeria, but specifically for the successes that Jaiz was able to record within this period. And also, personally, having been around that endeavor for 17.5 years, and perhaps during one of my last official engagements, I would have much to say, but to say Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah bi ni'matihi tatimmu salihat. And I believe that today's intercourse will assist us to look at the journey, which I said is just like the one step that we have taken. And 10 years is still very short in the life of a nation or a system, but it is a period which we believe has seen significant progress, which 20 years ago was seen as almost an impossibility. So I believe that today we have always been there, from Muhammad Lere to Abbas. I think it's representing Danusa. He was also both the representative and the Danusa himself were actively, from the regulatory point of view, they've always been there to help facilitate. Muhammad Ziad, I remember, God has made him to be around when all of these things were happening, and he provided the impetus around understanding the products here in Nigeria. And I think we had cause to go to him in South Africa at one point to sit together and learn the rudiments of the products and how they can be marketed, more importantly. And I think this is his role in enlightening, especially the pioneer staff of Jaiz, cannot be overstated. And of course, our Sheikh, even when he was nowhere near Central Bank, in seminars in Ilorin and around the country, he has always been there advocating how do we avoid interest. So we couldn't have been able to come on board. And without taking of the time, I will thank them in advance. It's a welcome address, but I thank them in advance for this commitment and for their commitment all along. And I also urge all participants to be very attentive, because there is so much that could be learned today to further reinforce our drive and our journey to help us carry the ingredient that make us to take Islamic finance to the next level. So welcome, and I wish all of us a very useful, very enriching deliberation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, MD sir, for this wonderful welcome address. As you are finishing your tenure in the couple of days or in few days, we pray for Allah's mercy and blessings for you in your future endeavor. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much. Now, before we move to the next presentation, we are going to take a very brief corporate videos and commercial break in the 2 or 3 minutes at the maximum. So please, Secretariat.
Ẹ kú déédé àsìkò yìí gbogbo ẹ̀yin oníbàárà wa. A dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ yín gan ni o. A kí yín tọ̀wọ̀tọ̀wọ̀. A dẹ̀ kí yín kú ọ̀sẹ̀ oníbàárà. Ọ̀sẹ̀ ayọ̀, ọ̀sẹ̀ ire ló máa jẹ́. Àwa ni tiyín tòótọ́, Jaiz Bank PLC.
السلام عليكم، هل أنتم بخير؟ إننا نشكركم ونحبكم من جائز بنك. شكرا جزيلا في شركنا وكذلك بخير. مع السلامة.
Ndewo ndị ezigbo ahịa anyị niile, Jaiz Bank na-eme gị ụtọ. Na-ekele gị maka nkwado gị.
Assalamu alaikum jamarama. Jaiz Bank nde sambisoro kurnotuna lamurdo.
Girbocha Jaiz Bank ko goɗɗi telegil masiyero ko heɓɓulla girbarka.
Ugomi megba shaka na wole gbai. Awa Jaiz Bank akede afupo amek meshabu anyajawa. Ashetu gbede megbolo mewolu kolowa almenabu anyajalu tobalule.
Barka da warhaka. Bankinmu na Jaiz na alfahari da ku abokan hulɗa. Muna matuƙar farin ciki da zaɓenmu da kuka yi a matsayin abokan cinikayya. Mun gode ƙwarai.
On yalli jam, Jaiz Bank ɗo homna mon shoggiltoɓe. Min usimon, min yettimon. Ɓalengol moɗon asawere shoggiltoɓe.
Happy Customer Service Week.
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 Thank you. That has been a very brief commercial break. Now the next item in our agenda is the first presentation with the title Global Islamic Banking Experience, Prospects and Challenges, to be delivered by Dr. Muhammad Ziad, Assistant Professor at INSEF, Malaysia, which is going to be presented in 20 minutes. But before then, let me briefly read the citation of Dr. Ziad. He is an assistant professor, an academic and former associate dean of e-learning and director of the executive education at International Center for Education of Islamic Finance. He is a multi-award winning scholar with almost 20 years of global experience as an executive consultant and Islamic scholar in Islamic finance and capital markets. Dr. Ziad has consulted, trained more than 7,000 finance professionals and Islamic scholars in most disciplines within the Islamic finance sector in Africa, Europe, and Middle East. He intends to focus on Islamic social finance, Sharia issues, and innovation, fintech, and sukuk, among other research areas. Dr. Ziad holds a PhD in Islamic finance from INSEF, BA Holmes Business Finance from Angelica Ruskin University, United Kingdom, and Chartered Islamic Finance Professional holder from INSEF. He also holds an MBA and certificate in Islamic law from the Management College of Southern Africa and University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, respectively. Dr. Ziad serves as chairman and member of several Sharia boards of Islamic banks and takaful companies internationally. He is a well-renowned scholar of high repute in the Islamic finance industry. Whoever is in the industry is fully aware of his contributions. Thank you, sir. You are welcome, and you have 20 minutes for the presentation. You are welcome, sir.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much. If I could ask permission to share my screen, please.
You can share, sir.
Still not allowed. Still unable to share, yeah? Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. Thank you, and it's certainly an honor and a pleasure to be here at the 10-year anniversary of Jaiz Bank, and of course, also greeting Malam Hassan Uthman and all the executives, all the team of Jaiz Bank. We've been working with them intimately throughout the period since 2007, 2008, and it's been a hard road. And mashallah, we've seen the fruits of the efforts with the Islamic finance regulation actually being launched, as you've mentioned, in 2011. We supported the launch of the Takaful regulation in 2012. And since then, alhamdulillah, there have been several Islamic banks or non-interest financial institutions in the country, as well as sovereign sukuk issuances, local issuances. And it's been quite a bumpy road, but it's been really, I think something that has been well achieved and well accepted within the Nigerian market. Now, briefly, I'm going to cover the economic lessons from COVID and whether we've actually learned anything. What were the major global Islamic finance responses? And has Islamic fintech responded to the issues? And finally, how will the Islamic finance sector evolve in the short to medium term? I've got 20 minutes. It's not a very long time, and there's a lot to talk about. So let's talk about some of the lessons we've learned. We've gone through a disruption and economic impact that the World Bank, the IMF, and most economists say will still play out over the next 2 to 3 years. And I think there's a lot of pain that many countries will have to face and will have to experience until inflation settles and stabilizes and economic growth is experienced once again. The inequality gap seems to have widened, and a lesson that we've learned during COVID is actually that the wealthy get wealthier during crisis, which indicates that the existing economic system that's practiced internationally is seriously flawed. It's where the wealthy, richest 10 men of the world actually see their income doubled, and 99% of humanity are worse off. If this is not an indicator that the way we've been doing things is seriously flawed, then I'm not sure what would be a good indicator. In South Africa, an example is 0.1% of the country owns more than 90% of the entire market. So if you understand how those percentages work, then you realize that the manner in which we've been conducting ourselves, especially from the financial sector, requires a significant overhaul. The focus has been around life, asset, and income protection. And going digital has become a matter of survival. And you'll see that Islamic fintech has also stepped up to actually try to solve the pain points in delivery and offering Islamic finance. So what was the response from global financial institutions? Internationally, conventional financial institutions have focused on sustainable business drivers. They've looked at ethical ESG, to be specific, E standing for environment, S standing for social impact or sustainable, and G standing for governance. So focusing on ESG disclosures, ESG implementations, and responsible financing. And they've tried to integrate those sustainability practices into the financing methodology. And finally, effectively disclosing what they've done. So it's not enough that the banks have actually changed their value intent. They've also shown how they've done it. And Islamic finance has not been any different. It's attempted to integrate the maqasid, the objectives of the Islamic law within the Islamic finance industry in order to move forward. And I'm going to show you how that's been done so far. A quick snapshot of Islamic finance growth, some quick facts. 2020 to 2021 saw a 10.6% growth from 17.3%. Now, 10.6%, that's not all bad, looking at a market that's really been experiencing downturn. So non-interest finance, Islamic finance, has actually done pretty well during pandemic and during the existing war, inflation increasing in most countries, and economic pressures. You've been feeling economic pressures in most countries, and Nigeria has really been feeling it. I know recently with inflation so high and liquidity, in fact, being swept up in the market. Financing growth has increased in the second half of 22. It's expected to grow even further. Saudi Arabia and Qatar have been doing well, but this is what happens during economic downturn. You've got one or two sectors that have been doing exceptionally well. Oil has gone into negative territory and then has careened past the $100 mark. So oil producing nations like Saudi Arabia and Qatar have done exceptionally well. Now, because they've done so well, they've also required less funding. And since they've required less funding, there are less sukuk in the market because of the high levels of liquidity from petro countries. Takaful, Islamic insurance, is expanding between 5 and 10%, but on the back of it, corporate defaults are expected to rise, and therefore credit risk mitigation on Islamic financing is expected to become even tighter. Now, on the right-hand side, you're looking at a small graph that indicates how Islamic finance influences their own sectors. So as an example, when Islamic finance moves past the 15% mark, the World Bank and the IMF see Islamic finance as being systemic in a country. And when it's systemic, it begins to become a major role player. Now, when it moves past the 30% mark, that's when it begins to influence the market positively. And by the 45 to 50% mark, it can actually influence the interest rate and drive towards profit sharing if that's what its focus is. It also can focus on socio-economic empowerment. So in summary, and you're going to see quite a lot of statistics and information in the next few slides, I want you to take this back. For Nigeria, if non-interest banking reaches the first milestone of 15%, then it can begin to influence the market. So Jaiz Bank, Taj, and the other influences will now actually have a positive impact on the entire financial sector. So that should be the first target, and an alliance with all non-interest financial institutions focusing on that 15% mark as the first target. I'm going to focus on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, what is the expectation? The projected Islamic finance asset growth year on year between 2019 and 2025 is around 8%. So you can see that going from a very high level of 17.4%, we expect to be moving to around 7.5% to 8% over the next 3 years. Overall, if you look at the growth, you'd see that GCC is still focusing on the largest amount of Islamic finance assets. Sub-Saharan Africa is only around $8 billion, a relatively small player, but in the scheme of things, you've got Nigeria and South Africa as the dominant countries in Islamic finance for Africa. As a snapshot of Islamic finance development, Malaysia has been at the forefront, and they have been at the forefront since the early 80s. 1983 is when they released their first regulation. They've been doing exceptionally well since then. If you look at this graph on the left-hand side, government benchmarks indicate that Malaysia has been exceptional in its financial innovation, in its governance, and in its Islamic finance awareness. It's been slow on the social side, but it does have a firm regulatory framework to develop the social impact mark. Saudi Arabia has been doing well on the social side, but in terms of financial innovation, it's been fairly stagnant. Governance is not a major factor in Saudi Arabia, whereas in Bahrain, that is the feature, and Bahrain can match or even exceed Malaysian impact when it comes to governance. On the signals of opportunity, in summary, what can we look forward to going forward? Well, I want you to take note of the yellow circles. The yellow circles indicate a strong signal for growth. So Indonesia is what we refer to as the sleeping giant. That's what we expect to see the massive growth in Islamic finance, and particularly on the social finance side. Indonesia is an expert in social finance, and they have an extensive framework using the Baitul Mal wa Tamwil institution that's beneath government, that really is extremely efficient on zakat distribution, on waqf, and integrating sukuk and Islamic finance within the social finance sector. So Malaysia, Pakistan, Bahrain, they are all learning from Indonesia when it comes to Islamic social finance models. Bangladesh is new to the market and is expanding its sukuk offering, whereas the fintech fintech sector, specifically on takaful technology, P2P, crowdfunding, that's where Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Malaysia have really been doing exceptionally well, and we expect a lot of growth in that sector as time goes by. But if we want to understand the very substantial contribution of Islamic finance to the global sector right now in pandemic and even before pandemic, then it would have to be the Islamic finance contribution to sustainability. And this is in particular the value-based intermediation, as you will see just now, and whether Islamic banking is really being adopted throughout the sector, the companies and corporate sector. Now, in particular, the halal sector is much larger than the Islamic finance sector. Islamic finance forms a subset of the halal economy. Halal in particular, when we look at the size of halal, we're looking at between 7 and 9 trillion US dollars. Islamic finance is about $3.1 trillion. So it's less than half the total halal economy. And the question is the halal economy utilizing Islamic finance to grow? Because if it is, then we can see a substantial ecosystem that's growing and supporting itself. Now, as you will see, smaller halal companies in Malaysia and other countries seem to use Islamic finance. But there's a gap in larger corporates that are halal manufacturers, halal travel and tourism. They are not effectively using Islamic finance, and there's a gap there, and therefore that's an opportunity. For Nigeria, the halal economy still needs to be defined. And if you see it as a business prospect, then really mobilizing the halal economy in West Africa is going to be an opportunity for Nigeria. If you've mobilized the halal economy, the halal sector, you can then allow the halal economy to utilize non-interest financing and boost the sector in that way. So there's a lot of opportunity. If you look at the right-hand side graph, I think that would just give you an indication of medium to non-SMEs, meaning to large corporates, and how they use conventional and Islamic. And the light blue is conventional, and the dark blue is Islamic. So as you can see, the smaller enterprises are all using Islamic, whereas the larger and the larger corporates in the halal sector are in fact not using it. Value-based intermediation, that is what the international market is seeing as the major contribution of Islamic finance today. And that is really mobilizing the maqasid or the objectives of the Islamic law into a regulatory and sectoral response to sustainable finance. So these are the particular game changers by focusing on online SME financing, using digital platforms and Islamic crowdfunding and P2P financing to support SMEs, to work on leveraging telcos and agent banks for takaful distribution, to look at cashless sectors that apply Islamic gateways and halal gateways, and really to unlock big data to mobilize Islamic sentiment and to drive that within the sector. The vision is to focus on responsible usage of finance, a high satisfaction rate, and a high take-up. But in order to achieve that, they must provide convenient access. And that is very much focused on technology, digital platforms as they go forward. Now, value-based intermediation really means taking responsible financing and maqasid and the SDGs and really mushing them up into something that, from a Sharia perspective, is regarded as focusing on socio-economic empowerment. And this is where non-interest banking is moving to. Malaysian banking, of course, is where you've seen the development of the VBI sector, and it has been progressing substantially. So overall, deposits and investments that are VBI related, meaning responsible, are around 50 billion ringgits. 50 billion ringgits, that is around 12 to 15 billion US dollars. And that's just in Malaysia alone. 18% of financing is VBI related, meaning it's not just Islamic, but it's responsible Islamic. And that's at around 82 billion, and you're talking about around 20 billion US dollars. So overall, the focus has been on responsible financing and providing even public infrastructure through this VBI approach. And now this VBI has moved over into the takaful industry. We've led the drafting of the VBI for takaful, and even takaful is using sustainable drivers to actually drive the industry and the sector. But perhaps the biggest prospect in Islamic finance globally is how social finance can fund the SDG deficits. And here social finance is where banks integrate zakat and waqf and other approaches like takaful for social finance, cooperatives for social finance, and qard hasan in order to plug the gaps in the SDG funding. In particular, for Nigeria, what we're looking at is a PPPP, not a triple P. So the standard approach has been blended finance using public-private partnerships. Our research indicates that for Nigeria, public-private partnerships are not the best solution. So the best solution for developing infrastructure in Nigeria is going to be around Islamic, now get this, this is a mouthful, Islamic public-private philanthropic partnerships. And philanthropic is the charitable base, and that's where you develop the waqf base. And here to look for examples, you can look at the cash waqf linked sukuk in Indonesia, where they've been utilizing that to develop hospitals, etc. So there's a lot of opportunity around there and filling the financing gaps. Some of the examples we've been involved in over the last few years is assisting some of the largest Islamic banks in the world to develop an impact scorecard using Islamic focus. And in order to develop the scorecard, you've got to develop products. So we've been developing Islamic blended enterprise financing products. We've also been developing urban farming products, where individuals can actually utilize urban farming packs developed by agricultural universities to supplement their income. Yes, we've done pilot phases and it's been very successful. It's now being rolled out by one of the largest Islamic banks in the country as a social finance initiative that is actually commercially driven, which means that you can finance an urban farming pack for a markup. It's beneficial to the bank, it's beneficial to the community as well. We've also been working on zakat for debt funds, and Waqf securitization and the development of Waqf. I'm going to end off, and I know it's already about 20 minutes. Yes, time flies. Islamic fintech. I mean, this is a huge market that's being quickly evolving. Saudi Arabia is leading in market size, but in terms of sophistication, it's really Malaysia that's been leading with Indonesia that has the most Islamic fintechs. For Nigeria, in order to reach the entire area, the region, we suggest that Islamic fintechs would need to be adopted significantly, and that's all the way from your crowdfunding to your payment channels, the wealth management solutions, digital assets, and we would find incumbent banks. Incumbent banks are your traditional banks like Taj and Jaiz. They would have to collaborate with existing fintechs to deliver unique products and to reach markets in a cost-effective way, a very cheap way, offer extensive Islamic deposits, and provide it all within a successful regulatory landscape. So there's a lot to do there. The short to medium-term focus internationally is to look at a redistribution architecture. And this is for the regulator to look at. Malaysia has mastered this approach. Indonesia is developing this approach. It's looking at, on the right-hand side, the regulators formulating redistribution policies at the central bank level, all the way through to development finance institutions and market institutions. So creating layered approaches to target different sectors and dividing the entire market into the T20 or the top 20 income, the middle 40% income, and the bottom 40% income, and then creating targeted strategies of non-interest finance to actually assist each of those sectors and develop them through socio-economic development. Finally, there is an ethical dilemma, and here the challenges are around the unbanked. And here there's a blind spot of 1.7 billion people. The majority of those are unbanked in the OIC. The 40% of 1.7 billion are Muslim, which indicates that the vast majority of any religious denomination require non-interest financing to solve their economic woes. And we must be careful here. The solution is not offering debt. The solution is offering a socio-economic uplifting product. And these solutions are available internationally. And here we appeal to the Nigerian market to look at these approaches as they go along. I end off by saying overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It's the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. And this is Nelson Mandela. Of course, Islamic finance is hugely responsible in terms of overcoming poverty, and a lot of eyes, a lot of focus, even from the international market, are on Islamic finance and the development of Islamic finance to take care of this socio-economic development. The only way to do it is to really go back to our core, the spiritual dimensions of Islamic finance, all the way from the Sharia committees and the Sharia boards through to the boards and the depositors, the stakeholders, understanding that in order for us to be successful, everyone must be successful. I'm going to end there. My 20 minutes are up. I thank you for the time you've afforded me. I congratulate Jaiz Bank in achieving such a major milestone. And of course, congratulations again to my dear brother, Malam Uthman, for his amazing achievements, and to the entire Jaiz Bank team for moving non-interest financing forward. Jazakumullah khair. Wa akhiru da'wana lilhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. That has been a global overview of Islamic banking, of Islamic finance, which cut across banking, capital market, insurance, and Islamic social finance, where Prof has highlighted the progress achieved so far in all these sectors. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward Prof in abundance. Now we are in Q&A session. I don't know if participants have questions, please they can ask through Q&A. Okay, there is one question here. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Thank you for the insightful lecture. I hear you mention crowdfunding in the discussion. Can you please talk about ethical crowdfunding schemes available in Islamic banking? Thank you.
Certainly. So Islamic crowdfunding comes in different forms. And there are four major forms. I'm not going to cover all the theory, but primarily we've been focusing on crowdfunding of investment projects. And crowdfunding of investment projects means that the crowdfunding platform must actually identify projects that can be audited and graded and have some basic track record. That has not been very easy to do. So crowdfunders have been collaborating with government and auditors and well-known investors in the market to identify valid projects, reliable projects, where the investors' money is being used effectively. Remember that in most scenarios, crowdfunding is not regulated. And because of that, there's a huge challenge in allowing investor money to go across a digital platform and then expect returns. And the approach would be risk sharing. And therefore, when there's no return at the end of the year, then the digital platform company will say, well, you know, it's risk sharing. So I'm sorry, you lost. And this is how profit sharing works. And this is the danger where investors may lose a lot of money and a lot of confidence. So there are some successful crowdfunders out there. There's an opportunity for Nigeria to implement crowdfunding, but it needs to be well managed. And one approach would be to look at Malaysia's approach in implementing a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox, where there is a testing of Islamic crowdfunders over a period. And after they've proven themselves to be safe and identifying good, strong investments, then they can actually go live and they can go into market. But saying all of that, I think what we also need is an ethical framework, a Sharia framework for Islamic crowdfunders. It's a lot. The question is huge, and the answer is very short. So please forgive me. Perhaps in a future session we can focus just on Islamic crowdfunding.
Thank you very much, Prof. One more question, which is going to be last because we are behind schedule time, Prof. Sir. Somebody was saying that you've been mentioning and highlighting or referencing to Malaysia and Indonesia in your presentation, sir. Throughout the presentation. Is there any lesson that the Jaiz Bank can learn from the experiences of Malaysia and Indonesia?
Yes. The reason I highlight them is because the Islamic Finance Development Indicator, the Global Islamic Finance Development Indicator, ranks Malaysia as #1 and Indonesia in the top 3 when it comes to social finance. So Nigeria can learn this. The manner in which Islamic finance has been implemented in those two countries is close to enabling regulation. So enabling regulation means that you must have a strong ecosystem to protect the stakeholders. Only then can you move forward. If you're going to allow Islamic finance to simply go unfettered without any supervision, especially in countries within sub-Saharan Africa, where they rank very high on corruption and very low on disclosure and transparency, then the people end up losing. So an important lesson from Malaysia and Indonesia, #1, a regulatory ecosystem. #2, social finance that is sophisticated, it is efficient, and it is well disclosed and audited. These two methods are two important lessons, and they are delivered through technology, digital platforms. And this is where these two countries have really excelled. If you remember these 3 factors, you should be okay, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this. And I think you've done justice to the topic and even the questions that follow the presentation. Thank you very much once again. And on behalf of the Jaiz Bank and the co-partners for this webinar, I want to use this opportunity to thank you once again for sparing time out of no time. We know your tight schedules and deliver this wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Prof. And we are very much grateful.
It is my pleasure. Jazakumullah khair for the opportunity, and we wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum.
Now, before we take another corporate video or commercial break, there is a poll that is going to be shared on the screen so that participants can try to respond, please, in a very short time. Secretariat, please, if the polls are ready. Okay. The question reads, the first example of Islamic banking in modern time or Islamic bank in modern world is, you just need to select only one. Bank Islam Malaysia, established in 1983. Islamic Development Bank, established in 1975. Dubai Islamic Bank, established in 1979. Mitgam Savings Bank, established in 1963 in Egypt. So you are to select the appropriate choice. Okay, so that has been the polls, and we now take the next commercial break in 2 minutes time, then we proceed.
It is good doing business with Jaiz Bank.
Are you aware that Jaiz Bank PLC is financing individuals and businesses without interest for over a decade now?
This my shop is financed by Jaiz Bank, and I'm happy with our partnership.
Alhamdulillah, my partnership with Jaiz Bank is fruitful.
I always count on Jaiz Bank.
It is good doing business with Jaiz Bank.
Thank you, Jaiz Bank, for helping my business to grow.
Come open an account with us to enjoy our unique products and services.
Thank you, Jaiz Bank.
Thank you, Jaiz Bank.
Thank you, Jaiz Bank.
Thank you, Jaiz Bank.
For more inquiries, visit any of our nearest branch to experience our exceptional non-interest facilities or our website at www.jaizbankplc.com. You can also reach us via 070-7730-000. Jaiz Bank, for a better life.
That has been a commercial break from the corporate communication of Jaiz Bank. Thank you. And now we move to the second presentation, which is going to be presented by Malam Muhammad Wadamu Azulere, a former director at the Central Bank of Nigeria. The title of the presentation is Milestone in the History of Islamic Banking in Nigeria. And before I invite the presenter, let me briefly share his citation. Malam Muhammad Muazu Wadalere is a former director at the Central Bank of Nigeria. He joined the services of the Central Bank of Nigeria as a senior supervisor around 1991 and grew through the ranks until he reached the rank of the director before he retired in 2018. He has BSc Economics from BUK, MBA from ABU, and Diploma in Islamic Banking and Insurance from the Institute of Islamic Banking and Finance, United Kingdom. He was the pioneer head of non-interest banking unit, that is Secretariat of the Financial Regulations Advisory Council of Expert FRES, which he helped to establish from the scratch. He was part of the committee that developed the first guidelines for the regulations and supervision of non-interest banks and the non-interest windows of conventional banks back in 2010 and 2011, as well as the guidelines for the regulation and supervision of non-interest microfinance banks, and the several other guidelines related to non-interest finance in the country. He represented the Central Bank of Nigeria at several high-powered committees of international multilateral organizations, such as Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, AOFI, Islamic Financial Services Board, IFSB, and International Islamic Liquidity Management Agency, IILM. Indeed, Malam Lere was among the flag bearers of institutionalizing non-interest banking in Nigeria, whose history of Islamic finance in Nigeria will not complete without mentioning them. Malam Lere is a renowned personality in the industry of Islamic finance or non-interest finance in Nigeria. Malam Lere, you are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir, can you kindly unmute yourself, sir?
Okay.
Sir, can you kindly unmute yourself?
Yes, I've done that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, sir, loudly. Thank you.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, let me thank Jaiz Bank for the opportunity given to me to be one of these panelists and to also share my experience, and also use this opportunity to congratulate Jaiz for this milestone of being in the business for the past 10 years. And so far, it has been a very good and successful story. I would like to also use this opportunity to welcome my colleagues, Dr. Ziad, with whom we have been working for years to institutionalize Islamic banking in Nigeria. In fact, Dr. Ziad, I can say, is almost a Nigerian because I know we took Dr. Ziad to so many places in Mina, Kaduna, Kano, Abuja. There's nowhere that we have not taken Dr. Ziad while we are trying to institutionalize this model of banking. On a note, let me see whether I can share my slides, even though the slide is big, but I will try as much as possible to summarize since I have only 20 minutes. Can we see the slides? Can we see the slides? Hello? Can we see the slides?
No, we can't. Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. You can see? Can you see now?
We can see your screen now.
You can see the screen? Can't display it. I cannot display it. Okay, let me search for it. Yeah.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Can see our screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, sir, we can see it. We can see it, sir. You can continue.
The presentation?
No, it's one of your, maybe it's your browser, sir. It's your inbox. Maybe you didn't select the right distance, sir.
Okay.
Maybe while sharing, you selected your browser instead of the PowerPoint, or yeah. You may kindly wish to exit that sharing screen, sir, and rejoin. I think will be better.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not going out.
Sorry, kindly share the screen, sir. Then you can look for the file.
Okay.
Then you can reshare later.
It's not responding. That's. Let me just log in again.
Please toggle back onto your Zoom and unshare the screen, sir. Okay.
I think I can just go ahead. Then later on, I can send the presentation for you to share. If it's okay, stop the sharing now. Maybe I saved it. Okay, let me see the files. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to open it through another way. Let me see.
So maybe because of time, because we are maybe you can go ahead with the presentation. So
yes, let me go with the presentation. Then so I will send the presentation to you later on.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, my task is to give you a milestone of the institutionalization of Islamic banking in Nigeria. This is a very, very big task because Islamic banking has come a long way. It has never been easy. Where do we start? When you are talking about Islamic banking or institutionalization of a banking model, where do we start? We start from the regulators, from the law. Before 1991, there was the Banking Act or the Banking Decree. And actually, nothing was mentioned about Islamic banking. But we have, according to research, we have a bank called Muslim Bank of West Africa that started in 1957 in Lagos. This Muslim Bank of West Africa was the idea of Alhaji Nuru Sule Oniwo. What prompted this was that after the 1940-1950 banking crisis, the Nigerian economy was mostly dominated by a lot of complaints that Nigerians have been segregated. So Alhaji Nuru Onuo decided to establish what we call Muslim Bank of West Africa in Lagos. His whole aim was just to assist the Muslim community around Lagos. This, I can say, is the first attempt in Nigeria for the institutionalization of Islamic banking. However, the bank was licensed, I think, in 1958. But according to research, there was no evidence that the operation of the bank was based on the Islamic principle, even though the name suggests that it was an Islamic bank. So it continued until around 1958, when the capital base of the banks were raised. We have regulation, and Mr. Osinawa, being a single owner of that bank, couldn't meet up because the initial capital that he used was £12,500 sterling. Later on, the capital of the bank was jacked up to £250 sterling, £250,000 sterling. Later on, when the capital base was raised to 300, he couldn't make it, and he was also sick around 1960. So the bank really lacks the capital and also lacks the managerial skill. So a decree was done in 1969 a ministerial decree to wind up that bank. So the lesson I want us to learn is, when you start something, you really need regulation. Without regulation, you cannot move anywhere. So that is just the starting point. So thereafter, in 1991, we have what we call the Banks and Other Financial Institution Decree. And we were lucky when that decree was being promulgated. The governor of the central bank then and some other Nigerians who have foresight, who are also thinking ahead, that one day, based on what is happening globally, Islamic Bank is going to form part of the financial intermediation in Nigeria. So certain sections of the BOFIA, they inserted the law that will allow you to operate Islamic banking in Nigeria. Even though they did not call it Islamic banking, they call it Profits and Loss Sharing Bank. So when you look at Section 9 of the decree at that time, it gives the categories of the banks. We have the commercial, merchants, other financial institutions, Profits and Loss Sharing Bank. Then we have other sections of the BOFIA that gave powers to Profits and Loss Sharing Bank, like Section 21. It has exempted the Profit and Loss Sharing Bank from displaying its interest rate, which is required by conventional banks. Then we have Section 61, which also define what a Profit and Loss Sharing Bank is. Then we have other sections like Section 52, which said the governor was given the power to exempt profit and loss sharing from the provision of that decree. So I can say this is the beginning, and this is what made it possible for us to have a foundation for the institutionalization of Islamic banking, even though a lot of contentious issues arose when we tried to implement. So after 1991, there are some efforts from Nigerians, notably Alhaji Yinka Falawi of Lagos, Mr. T. Amu Bello, Lagos also, then Alhaji Aminu Dantato in Kano. They formed a group and they consulted Islamic Development Bank Jeddah with the intention that they want to start the first Islamic bank. They had what we call Al-Aqidah Bank. They wrote their proposal and feasibility studies, and luckily for them, IDB accepted and they forwarded their application to Central Bank for license. So the application was processed. But however, you are all aware that at that time, we don't have any regulation. There was no regulation at all. In fact, the knowledge was very shallow. We don't even, a lot of people at the Central Bank don't even know what it is. In fact, some are even surprised, how can you operate a bank without interest? How do you survive? So all these are issues that came up. However, the Central Bank still continued. But along the line, there was a problem between the promoters of Lagos and Kano. And I don't need to mention some of those issues that prompted them, which really killed the project. But before then, the IDB has already sent in some dollars to Central Bank as part of its contribution. So they wait and wait and wait. We couldn't resolve the issues between the two partners. So that bank couldn't see the light of the day. At the end of it all, IDB wrote to Central Bank requesting for a refund of its capital, which was really done. I was privy to that information. So after that, another attempt was by, everybody knows Habib Bank, now Keystone Bank. It was an offshoot of Habib Bank of Pakistan. I think then they have a little knowledge of what Islamic banking is all about. So they applied, now instead of a license, but a window for them to operate, and window of Islamic Bank in Habib Bank. This was around 96 or 95. But that time, you know, there was no regulations, and even the regulators did not even understand what it is. So they took it as normal products like any other conventional bank. So it was given the approval. So Habib Bank commenced the non-interest banking window. And this banking interest window, to be frank, came, we discovered that there was nothing Islamic in it. It is just a normal way of raising deposits for Habib Bank, for those that are detesting interest, but there is no corresponding assets. In fact, all those that deposited money in the non-interest banking of Habib window, I don't think can say they have benefited in terms of returns like we have now. But because the regulators doesn't have rules or regulation, nothing happens. But the performance in terms of raising the deposits was very huge. Honestly, it was very huge because we did the examination and they really raised a lot of money because of those people that are not interested in interest. So, but in terms of asset creation, there was nothing to write home about. So, what happened? A major milestone struck which helped Islamic banking in Nigeria. What is it? In and around 2003, there was a lot. Nigeria is a member of the G8, and we normally attend meetings and issues of Islamic banks are normally discussed. So there was a lot of need because Nigeria then has already joined the OIC. There was need for us to really look at this concept. So there was a lot of pressure on government to really join the IDB as a member. So even during Shagari's regime, those hues and cries were ignored. But luckily for us, around 2003, while attending the meeting, Obasanjo, after being convinced, he decided to say, okay, let us join IDB. In fact, he made a very powerful comment, which I would like to read for everybody to know. Obasanjo said, look at the Nigerian debt. All we had borrowed up to 1985 was around $5 billion dollars. And we have paid about $16 billion. Yet, we are still being told by our creditors that we owe about $28 billion. He said that $28 billion came about because of the injustice in the foreign creditors' interest rates. If you ask me, what is the worst thing in the world? I would say it is compound interest. This is what Obasanjo said. So based on that, I think it was a booster and he was convinced, look, let us join the IDB. In fact, he needs interest-free loan to even develop his farm in Ota. So we joined the IDB as a member. In fact, currently, we are the fourth largest contributor to or shareholder in IDB with about 7.66%. So this really gave us a booster because after joining the IDB, a technical team from IDB visited Nigeria in 2007. When they came, they visited the government, they had a meeting with the Ministry of Finance, and part of their meeting also, they are going to meet with the CBN governor. So and the issues they are going to discuss is the issue of Islamic banking. So luckily, I was invited to that meeting based on my little knowledge of Islamic finance. So I joined the meeting. So a lot of issues were discussed, including what are we doing to see that Islamic banking becomes a reality. And so we itemized most of the issues and challenges. And after the meeting, I wrote a very powerful memo to the governor, informing him that, look, after our meeting with IDB, these are the resolutions that really there is need for us to look at Islamic finance banking because it is a growing concept globally, and we cannot exclude ourselves. And these are my recommendations for CBN to adopt. Luckily, those recommendations were approved. And part of the recommendation was to send a team to go and understudy Islamic banking in Malaysia and other countries and come and start the development of the regulatory and supervisory framework for Islamic finance, Islamic banking in Nigeria. So a team was led by Mr. Tunde Lemon, who was also a pastor, who is the Deputy Governor, Financial Sector Surveillance of the Central Bank at that time. So all licenses are under him. So he led the team, and we appointed KPMG to be our technical partners. And I was asked to constitute a committee. We constituted a committee within Central Bank Banking Supervision Department, including our head of the committee was a Christian, Mr. Danny Eke, who is a lawyer, and we have Mr. Obot, we have myself, Let Sherehu, and some others. So we moved. We went to Malaysia, we studied and we visited Bank Negara, Malaysia, we visited IFSB, we visited so many projects financed by Islamic banks, and we went to Dubai, we went to Bahrain, we saw it. As God will have it, before we even come back, Mr. Tunde Lemo said, look, Lere, when I come back, we must do this Islamic banking, because I can see the benefits these people are getting. They did with school. Look at this, look at that. Why can't we do it? It doesn't matter. So my chairman came, we wrote a powerful report to Soludol then, the governor. He said, look, when we presented the report, he said, I don't know anything about Islamic Bank. Are we convinced? Suleiman Barao was a deputy governor. He said, look, I have read it, it's in order. So our first draft of guidelines came in 2009. And at the same time, as part of our recommendation was for us to join the Islamic Financial Services Board as a full council member, which was approved also, that we should join. So we have joined. So this really gave us an opportunity for us to move on. While we are doing that, at the other end, that is the operator side, Ahmed Zakari & Co., a chartered accounting firm, conducted an first international conference at Sheraton Hotel in conjunction with Institute of Islamic Banking, London. And we have a lot of speakers around the globe, including Justice Taqi Usman of Pakistan. They came, and the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, headed by the Sultan, also sent representatives. So a lot were discussed, and part of the community was, look, we need to move ahead, we need to develop something. So a committee was formed, a steering committee was formed. The Sultan said we should form a steering committee that will drive the process of establishing an Islamic bank in Nigeria. And it happens that I was a member of that committee. My deputy governor, Dr. Shamsuddin Usman, then was also a part of the company. Then Group Captain Usman Jibril late was the chairman. We have DIG Jika, we have Professor Ibrahim Umar, we have so many across the, we have Dr. Adebite, Secretary General of Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs. So we started and we commenced work. We started meeting at Area House in Kaduna almost every 2 weeks. And Ahmed Zakari Amko was the secretariat of that committee. And I know one of your staff, Adamu was the secretary. So we worked so hard to bring a blueprint. And that time there was the issue of Sharia that has come up in Nigeria, in Zamfara and others. So we also incorporated Ahmed Sani Yarima. I say you cannot do Sharia without an economic empowerment. So we also expanded and we worked together. So at the end of it all,
you've taken a very long time,
okay.
and our time is very, very limited.
Okay.
And we are enjoying this long history of the milestone, the struggle you have already undergone. Okay. In fact, I think Jaiz Bank need to have a special webinar for historicizing the Islamic finance in the country. So I don't know if you can summarize in a few minutes because the 20 minutes has elapsed since.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
So that's why I said my paper is going to be very long, but okay.
Okay.
So
okay,
at the end of it all, we came up with the suggestion that Jaiz to come on, and we have some. We did the Jaiz, and we sent the application to Central Bank. We worked very hard to see how we can license Jaiz. There are a lot of issues, and for the licensing, there are a lot of changes of capital base, which is the Jaiz couldn't meet that time, and so a lot has happened before Jaiz was licensed in 2011 on 11th November. So these are some of the challenges. So now Jaiz was licensed in 2011 and commenced operation in January 2012. Thereafter, I know they face a lot of challenges because we have so many things undone, like the issue of liquidity management and so many other things. So what is the way forward after licensing? Now that we have 3 banks and we have other banks, what is needed? I think my recommendation now is for the CBN to review the existing guidelines, because the existing guidelines does not capture most of the things that we are doing now based on the experience that we have on the ground. I'm sure that guideline is due for review. Then for Jaiz, or for the operators, we need to really display the difference between the conventional and the Islamic bank. Let us see the low-hanging fruit transcending into the economy. At least we have seen one now. The government has taken the lead by doing the sukuk, and everybody is seeing the benefit of the sukuk. So there is need for Jaiz to really look at how you can transcend the low-hanging fruit to the economy and also display the difference between the conventional and the Islamic, so that the Islamic banking will grow as it should be. So I think because my time is up, I wish to inform the people, the participant, that Jaiz Bank remains the pillar behind the development of Islamic banking industry in Nigeria. Because from a single bank in 2011, today we have 3 full-fledged banks, 2 windows of conventional bank, and many of whom draw their manpower from Jaiz Bank, a price that a pay setter has to pay. So
indeed.
In fact, but you should not be discouraged. You should remain the pace setters. You should be the leader in the industry. I thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful and fruitful presentation, which I believe if you are given double of the time given to you, we won't tire and you will not exhaust what you have, because it is the struggle that you have undergone it for about 3 decades. Thank you, sir, for this presentation. One of the major takeaways of this is that the most successful milestone in the history of Islamic finance is the issue of joining IDB, Nigeria becoming a chartered member of IDB, and the subsequent release of the regulation, because several attempts were made before, so many years before the existing or coming up of Jaiz. For more than 2 decades, there were several attempts. But after the release of regulation, we can see the progress that we recorded, because any attempt to establish any formal system without the regulation, it is automatically a failed attempt on arrival. When your regulator has no regulation to regulate you, there won't be any regulation. Thank you, sir. And I oblige the central bank and other operators in the industry to take with all seriousness the recommendations that you provided, sir. And we look forward to see the review of the guidelines for the non-interest banking, non-interest microfinance in the country. Now we are in Q&A session, maybe we'll take one because we are very late behind the scheduled time. There is also another polls that is going to be released as we take some of the questions. Okay, let's see one of the questions here. Alhamdulillah, I was in team that worked for about 10 years to get Jaiz Bank registered. I can confirm a lot what Alhaji Lere said, Alhamdulillah. Okay, so this is from Mala Muhammad B. Husseini, who was a living witness to what has been said by Malam Lere. So thank you very much. Now the polls, the previous, the polls that was been answered previously. 36% answered the Bank Islam Malaysia established in 1983, while 19% answered Islamic Development Bank. Then Dubai Islamic Bank established in 1979 got 7%, while Mitgamr 37%, which I believe is the correct answer. Now we are going to take another polls from the Secretariat, please. Somebody was asking that you would like to have the copy of the papers presented. Inshallah, it will be provided in due course. Okay.
Doctor, please kindly proceed.
Okay. So now we are moving directly to the third presentation, which is going to be delivered by our able professor, Professor Abdul Razak Abdul Majid Alaro, the pioneer professor of Islamic financial laws in West Africa region in general, not only in Nigeria, who is a member of the Advisory Council of Experts of the Central Bank, Financial Regulations Advisory Council of Experts of Central Bank, FRES. His presentation is going to be on the legal and regulatory framework of Islamic banking in Nigeria, gaps and future outlook. But before I invite Prof for the presentation, I would like to briefly read his citation, even though he is not in the industry, but at least for some of us that are not much acquainted with his expertise. Professor A.A. Alaro is a Sharia expert, barrister and solicitor of Supreme Court of Nigeria, and an internationally certified arbitrator. His area of specialization is Islamic financial transactions with emphasis on banking, insurance, and capital market, and has published in reputable peer-reviewed journals across the world. Currently, he's a professor and head of Department of Islamic Law, Faculty of Law, University of Ilorin, a member of the Central Banks of Nigeria's Advisory Council of Experts, and member of Advisory Council of Nigerian National Insurance Commission. He has also served as advisor consultant to the Debt Management Office, DMO, Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and National Pension Commission, among others. He also heads the Research and Translation Committee of the Union of African Muslim Scholars, with headquarters in Bamako, Mali. Professor Alaro is an alumnus of Islamic University of Medina, Saudi Arabia, where he graduated with first-class degree in 1993 and was listed in 2017 as one of the most outstanding alumni of the university worldwide. Professor Alaro has also been invited to speak in many high-impact fora, including International Islamic Liquidity Management Roundtable on Sukuk, African International Conference on Islamic Finance, SAWS Workshop on Islamic Finance, University of London, World Halas Expo, to mention but a few. Professor Alaro is a renowned scholar, preacher, and sheikh whoever interacts with him will bear witness to this. You are welcome, sir, and you have, as usual, 20 minutes for this presentation. We are very mindful of the time because we are behind the schedule time. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First and foremost, let me begin by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's really my pleasure to also be part of this program that is not just celebrating Jaiz at 10, but also is an opportunity to chronicle the achievements so far and even the challenges, as well as looking into the future. How can we move the Islamic banking industry to a higher level? I appreciate the Jaiz Bank MD and his team, Malam Hassan Usman, and his entire team. Can I share my screen?
Yes, Prof, go ahead, please.
Okay. Am I sharing now?
Perfect, Prof. You can go ahead, please.
Okay. So having said this and being mindful of the time constraint within just 20 minutes, I am to discuss the legal and regulatory framework of Islamic banking in Nigeria to identify gaps and also the future outlook. When we talk of the legal framework for Islamic, sorry, the screen is not moved. Okay. The legal framework. Let's take an overview of the legal framework of Islamic, or popularly known as non-interest banking in this part of the world. The overarching legal framework for Islamic banking in Nigeria is the Constitution itself. The strongest backing for the operation of Islamic banking in the country is the Constitution, the ground norm, the highest law in the land. By virtue of Section 38 of the Constitution, which guarantees freedom of religion for every citizen, this freedom is extended to also cover freedom to manifest one's religion in practice and observance. And this is where the practice of Islamic banking and the observance of the ethos, the rules, the regulations, and principles of non-interest Islamic banking will become handy. So practicing Islamic banking, as Jaiz and others are doing, is supported completely by the constitutional provision in this particular section. And I must also add here that contrary to some claims in some quarters, this is not in conflict with Section 10 of the Constitution. That is the section that says Nigeria as a state shall not adopt any religion as a state religion. Evidence abound all over the world that adoption or introduction of Islamic or non-interest banking is not synonymous with the adoption of a state religion. Whoever is saying this may be saying that mischievously, but the truth of the matter is that we have a lot of countries, more than 80 countries of the world today, wherein this form of banking is thriving, is being practiced. Some of them are Christian or non-Muslim dominated countries. We can mention countries like UK, US, and the rest of them. So this is a very good foundation for us. We have the strongest backing of the Constitution in this section that I've just mentioned. In addition to that, I'm happy one of the founding fathers, although he may not like himself to be addressed that way, Alhaji Lere preceded me in talking this morning. He has mentioned BOFIA. That is another very strong legal framework for the operation of Islamic banking in this country. Banks and Other Financial Institution Act, BOFIA, is another legal framework for Islamic banking in Nigeria. This is also not free from controversy, but I'm happy to say here this morning that the unnecessary controversy on whether what Alhaji Lere referred to as profit and loss sharing bank allowed in BOFIA is the same as non-interest banking. Because we had it, some people will argue that what the law allows you to do is profit and loss sharing banking, not non-interest banking. You know, sometimes in this part of the world, we like to make a mountain out of a molehill. I don't see any difference all over the world. These are nomenclature. These are terminologies that are used interchangeably all over the world. Let me give you an example of a close country to us in Nigeria. In Morocco, up till today, all their Islamic banking institutions are known as PLS institutions. Al-Bunuk Tasharukiya. That is the official name up till this morning in Morocco. So Islamic banking, non-interest banking, PLS banking are all the same. But fortunately, this controversy lingered on for some time, and we all know. And we must give kudos to our legislators, the lawmakers in Nigeria. They've done a good job in collaboration with other stakeholders, central bank and others, by coming up with a new set of law. BOFIA 1991 that was referred to by Alhaji Lere is no more in operation. That law, that act has now been replaced with BOFIA 2020. And this controversy through BOFIA 2020 has been permanently laid to rest. When you take Banks and Other Financial Institution Act 2020, the recent law, it has plethora of provisions. Many sections of BOFIA 2020 expressly provide for non-interest banking. And that is why you can see on my screen, I've referenced some of those sections, section 2 sub 5B, section 3 sub 1D, section 4 sub 1, and the list goes on and on. All these are express provisions that leave no ambiguity as to what the law allows in Nigeria. Call it non-interest banking, call it profit and loss sharing banking, and even call it Islamic banking if you wish, as Britain, the Great Britain did by allowing Islamic Banking of Britain, IBB, to be registered in that country. So that is another very strong legal framework that we have for the operation of Islamic banking in the country. Now, looking at the future, I believe strongly that what we have, the situation today in Nigeria, does not support having a very strong Islamic banking industry. Why? A lot of regulations that we are using to supervise, to run, to manage Islamic banking in Nigeria today are in the form of what we call subsidiary legislations. These are guidelines, rules, and regulations issued by the central bank governor, although who is empowered to so doing. But if you ask any lawyer, they will tell you subsidiary legislation is not as strong as having a primary legislation. I think looking at the future now, an industry that has grown from being one to becoming about, we have 3 full-fledged now, we have a lot of windows, and it continues to grow. I think it is high time. We've given kudos a short while ago to our legislators. We still need to call on them to do the needful. It's high time that we have a whole set of primary legislation that will take care of all that is needed to strengthen this ever-growing industry. If we do that, we will be following good precedent and best practices all over the world. Dr. Ziad spoke before me this morning. You can see him, a questionnaire raised that you kept on mentioning Malaysia, because Malaysia is leading globally. But what we should note is that one of the reasons why Malaysia is so successful in this industry is the backing of the law. Malaysia achieved this milestone that we are calling on our legislators in Nigeria to achieve as far back as 2013. They also started like us, but when it got to a stage, they felt the need and they did exactly what was needed to be done by enacting a law, an act called Islamic Financial Services Act, IFSA 2013. Alongside, they have their own BOFIA. Their own BOFIA is called FSA, Financial Services Act 2013. So the two laws are in operation today, and that is in the interest of a stronger Islamic banking industry. We are also calling for that by way of looking at the future for this industry. And now I'm going to quickly, for the rest of the time, now point at regulatory issues that I think need to be addressed if we really want to move this industry forward, and we must all strive for that, because it's good for the country. We don't need to say more than what Alhaji Lere has said, what President Obasanjo has said, what former Deputy Governor Mr. Tunde Lemo has said. We don't need more than that to prove that Islamic banking is not only good for Muslims, it's good for the entire citizens of this country, just as this is good for other citizens of the world. Now, there are regulatory issues that I will just refer to. We may not have enough time to go into details. But the first one I want to raise here is that the regulator itself, represented by the Central Bank of Nigeria, is in need of human resources development and capacity building for regulators. There is a principle in law that says, nemo dat quod non habet. You don't give what you don't have. Nobody can give what he doesn't have. It's very clear. With due respect, as an insider to a certain extent, being an advisor and consultant to Central Bank and other regulatory bodies of Islamic banking and finance in the country, I think I have that privileged information that what we have today, we do not have yet sufficient human resources that can man the industry at the regulatory level. You know, it's not only that what you don't have, you can't give, but you must even be a step ahead of the operators. Operators should not be more knowledgeable than regulators. If you want to have effective and efficient regulation, you actually need to be a step ahead of them. The reality today is that operators in most cases are more knowledgeable than regulators. And that will tell you the deficiency that we can have in such a regulatory environment. So I'm calling on the Central Bank as the regulator to scale up. I know it's doing a lot in this direction, but it needs to be scaled up by developing more human resources and building more capacity for its staff, particularly in this department that I've highlighted: the Banking Supervision Department, Financial Policy and Regulation Department, and of course, the Phrase Secretariat, which is also housed in the FPRD. And in so doing, Central Bank has the full backing of the law to do this. Let me read unto you what we have in section 10(2) of the Interpretation Act in Nigeria. It says, an enactment which confers power to do any act shall be construed as also conferring all such other powers as are reasonably necessary to enable that act to be done or are incidental to the doing of it. What we are saying is this: to have regulators that will be a step or steps ahead the operators is actually necessary to enable the regulation of Islamic banking industry, which the CBN is empowered to do by law. And let me also clear any doubt. This is not in any way calling for special job opportunities for Muslims. It's not true. At the Central Bank today, we have people who are non-Muslims and are part of the machinery, that are part of the team managing, supervising, and regulating Islamic banking industry. If you have the knowledge, the door is open for you. In fact, Alhaji Lere will bear witness to this. For the whole period that I've served so far as advisor and consultant to Central Bank of Nigeria, I've never had a Muslim to head the Phrase Secretariat. All the past and present head of Phrase Secretariat, which I belong to as a member, they are all non-Muslim. They have all been non-Muslims. So we should do what is good for the country, and we shouldn't allow feelings to Number two, I hope the time will permit me. I have about 6 or 7 of them. Regulation and oversight function, where a third party, apart from an Islamic or non-interest bank, is involved. This is also a problematic area of the regulation of Islamic banking in the country. CBN is doing well, very well, in the areas of regulating banks that are under its regulatory purview. But by nature of Islamic bank, you will have some other parties who are not banks that will be part of the operation. Let me refer to the 2 examples here. NPIs, for example, non-permissible income. A bank, an Islamic bank, may have, not by way of choice, but by way of accident, or by whatever reason. Something may come into it as a non-permissible that will be declared as being non-permissible. Now, the regulation is that it must be channeled to charity. The bank must never benefit from it. But some banks in Nigeria, I think Jaiz inclusive, have now come up with an idea of having foundations that will be the one disbursing these funds on behalf of the banks, which is a welcome idea. But we ran into a big problem when the foundation now thought that it can operate without any regulation from the Central Bank of Nigeria. Meanwhile, the bulk of the money that is at your disposal is coming from a bank. So it was a very huge controversy that erupted, because as money coming from an Islamic bank, CBN must actually know how it is going to be spent and disbursed. So this is one area that I think we need to strengthen our regulatory oversight when a third party is involved. We don't stop at regulating the banks alone when we have other parties involved in the transaction. Another example here, and it's very, very unfortunate, we have what we call economic intervention schemes. We have targeted credit facility because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the difficulties imposed on people in their businesses and the rest of them. CBN came up, federal government through CBN came up with interventions. But again, as an Islamic bank, the way Islamic banking operates is that you cannot just give people money and exchange them to and expect them to pay back and have a return to it. There must be an asset bought and sold. So there was a need to involve some vendors, some businessmen and women, and they are actually making mockery of the whole thing. What is playing out today is that when a beneficiary comes to most of the vendors, and I have my evidence for saying so, they will just arrange with them that instead of you buying and going to sell or whatever, we don't have all this product. CBN has approved 500,000 for you. Why not you taking 450 and let's retain 50,000 naira? Meanwhile, at the end of the day, you will have to repay the whole 500,000. This is a riba-based transaction. It's no more Sharia compliant. This is not coming from the banks, I must confess, but it's coming from third parties that are not any other regulatory purview of the central bank, the owner of the fund. We need to do something in that respect. The next one has to do with taxation of Islamic banking product. The tax authorities must work in a way, in synergy with central bank and other regulators in a manner that will not strangulate the industry, that will help the industry to thrive and develop. Now, For example, we have received complaints from some of the operators, some of the non-interest banks in Nigeria, that when you ask us to isolate MPI, remember I told you, MPI is not an income for the bank, non-permissible income. It's not an income for the bank. But what is happening is that the tax authorities will insist on taxing MPI before disbursing it to charity. It doesn't help. The bank is not benefiting in any way from MPI, and yet you want to impose tax on it for holding such an amount of money that is primarily meant for charitable causes. Another area of this that I will advise that regulators should work in synergy to find a solution to is what takes place sometimes in form of double taxation of Islamic banking products. Again, we have to look at the peculiarities, the specificities of this banking order. A Murabaha product, for example, yes, the bank will own temporarily, but it is not owning for the sake of just owning to become an asset of the bank. It will instantly transfer same to the customer. Now, when you tax the product, when the bank buys from the vendor, and again, you also tax by the time the bank is transferring ownership to the customer, it amounts to double taxation. And in any economy, double taxation is not helpful for the growth of any economy. So we want to draw the attention even of the tax authorities and to work in synergy with other regulators.
So your time is almost finished, but kindly round up in 2 minutes, please.
It's almost getting to an end. You know, I told you about 7 or thereabout. I think this is the 5th one. NDIC and NIB deposit insurance. The deposit insurance scheme in Nigeria, the law up till today is that any deposit in any Nigerian bank, be it conventional or non-interest, is covered by NDIC insurance. But we have to take cognizance again of the specificities of this banking order. When you have a current account deposit, yes, you can guarantee that, you can ensure that, but it is totally non-Sharia compliant for you to guarantee savings account that is operated on the basis of Mudaraba. Mudaraba is an investment account, and you don't guarantee neither the capital nor the return in any investment, except in cases of negligence or other practices that are not allowed on the part of the operators. But generally, what is taking place today is that it's like a general rule that any deposit in any Nigerian bank must actually be covered under NDIC insurance. That also needs to be looked into. Another area is sometimes circulars will emanate from Central Bank of Nigeria as a regulator of all banks, irrespective of your nature, irrespective of the transactions, whether you are conventional or non-interest banking. But again, taking cognizance of the peculiarity, specificities of this banking system. We received a complaint some time ago that the same intervention scheme that I mentioned a short while ago, CBN thought it wise, and it was a very good decision, that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a regulatory forbearance that reduced the rate of return payable on any facility. Then immediately after the COVID-19 pandemic, a circular came to all banks to restore back the original rate of return before COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, some of the non-interest banks in Nigeria have actually given out those facilities under a Murabaha arrangement. In a Murabaha arrangement, price must never change. Rate must never change. It's a sale product. Once you have sold your asset, the sale price remains the same from the beginning to the end. You don't have that liberty of changing prices or changing rate of return in any Murabaha product. Last but not the least, this is the penultimate one, Sharia compliance and Sharia audits in our non-interest or Islamic banks. It is not a good practice to have the two under one umbrella. under one head of a unit or a department, because they have to work as a check. One has to work as a check for the other. If you now put both the Sharia auditor and the Sharia compliance officer under one single head, as Sharia unit, as Sharia department, it's actually not, it's not going to work the way it ought to be. Compliance is an ex-ante process, while audit is an ex-post activity. So we need to separate between Sharia unit and Sharia audit and the Sharia compliance department in our non-interest or Islamic banks in the country. And finally, Mr. Moderator, this is the last one. Non-interest banks regulations and judicial interpretation. I must say a word on this because if care is not taken, issues that others have had in some other countries and have come out of it after a lot of suffering, a lot of action. We don't need to go the same way. What I'm trying to say is that the law in the country gives jurisdiction in adjudicating banking matters to high court. And when it is in a matter of customer-banker relationship, it doesn't even make any difference, whether it is a federal high court or a state high court. Just a high court can hear such a case. But the issue now is that, do we have competent, let me withdraw that word, they are competent, but do we have people that are versed in Islamic commercial law in those courts to adjudicate on matters relating to Islamic finance? An instance here that is worrisome. In this case, System Property Development Consortium Limited and one other, and Jaiz Bank. Jaiz Bank is a party, was a party in that case. The summary of the fact is this: we have what we call in Islamic banking industry, not just in Nigeria, all over the world. It is there to safeguard the interest of the industry, not to kill industry by some unscrupulous element, by some people that do not mean well for the industry. What do we mean by penalty for default is that if you default on any product between you and an Islamic bank, if it is for a good reason, we will apply the Quranic verse. The Quran says, if anybody is in the difficulty of paying, then give them some respite. But what of whoever is deliberately defaulting or delaying the payment of what is due to an Islamic bank? And that is why scholars all over the world have come up with this innovative solution, that we can have a penalty that will be imposed on the defaulter that is defaulting not on account of not having money to pay, but deliberately doing that to harm an Islamic bank. But at the same time, it becomes a non-permissible income that such a bank will never benefit from. But in this case, the judge did not see it that way. He equated the penalty for default to a loan or to an interest being charged on a loan facility, which is not allowed for an Islamic bank to do. We agree on that. But the concept of default, penalty for default, is totally different. It's totally different from allowing a bank to charge interest on loan. And that is why it is normally said that whatever is charged as penalty must be channeled to charitable causes. So this is, as I told you, Malaysia is another good example. They had these issues at the beginning of the development of Islamic banking industry. And that is why, look at part of what they did back then. They introduced a section into their central bank law. The Central Bank of Malaysia Act 2009, section 56 of 1 says, wherein any proceedings relating to Islamic financial business before any court or arbitrator, any question arises concerning a Sharia matter, the court or the arbitrator, as the case may be, shall take into consideration any published rulings of the Sharia Advisory Council. That is the equivalent of phrase in Nigeria. For such questions, Sharia Advisory Council for its ruling. This is a good practice. But if you cannot do that in Nigeria, the way out the way forward in Nigeria, we can simply expand the jurisdiction of Sharia Court of Appeal to become a court of first instance in Islamic banking matters. We have Sharia lawyers, Sharia judges who have the requisite knowledge and expertise in this particular area. We can simply have an expansion of their jurisdiction, but that will require, I know, a constitutional amendment. And that is why I'm suggesting, in the absence of that one being done, CBN as a regulator can simply constitute a special tribunal. And this will not be the first time it will happen in this country. We have precedent in the Investment and Security Tribunal that is being used for capital market related matters. We have tax appeal tribunal for tax related dispute arising from operations of various tax laws. So these are good precedents that the CBN as a regulator can also follow in managing this very, very delicate matter that we shouldn't allow to degenerate into a bigger crisis for the industry. And with this, once again, I thank you for your attention, and I thank the organizers, the Jaiz Bank PLC, for putting up this important program, and I wish you more and more successes in the years to come. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Prof, very much for this wonderful and resourceful presentation. Indeed, we have all learned from the vast of your knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you in abundance and increase you in wealth and health. Indeed, Prof has highlighted so many important issues ranging from the regulatory basis or legal basis for the non-interest finance in the country, right from the BOFIT of 1991, moving to BOFIA of 2020, which clearly highlighted some basic or specific components regarding to Islamic or non-interest finance in the country. And Prof has called upon all and sundry to push and work towards realization of a substantive or primary legislation, which will replace the subsidiary legislation that we have in the country, which we are going to copy from the countries that are advanced in Islamic finance, Malaysia and Indonesia, to mention some of these countries. And finally, Prof has also called on the need for establishing a very strong litigation system or arbitration, which will take care of all cases to avert or to avoid any issue that will lead into problem in the future. Thank you very much, Prof. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you in abundance. Now we're going to take some of the questions, if any. I can see so many questions, but there seems to be not much related to the presentation. Some are directly to the management of the bank. Okay, there is one at Professor Alaro. Are there efforts by Islamic banking sector in Nigeria towards involving the management of pension and NHI scheme for those citizens that are interested in non-interest transactions? Jazakallahu bi khairan. I think this is very important question. Prof may kindly wish to chip in regarding the pension. I believe maybe the person asking is not aware of the point 6 that was introduced since last year by the PENCOM. So Prof, kindly shed more light on this, the NHIS and the pension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question, and a question that will be agitating the minds of many. It's a good development that has been happening in the industry. You know, this is what we have been calling for since the beginning. Islamic finance is like a value chain activity. You have banking, it must go with other value chain components. That is why when you are developing your banking, you must look at ways of developing your insurance, developing your capital market, and now developing your pension scheme and even mortgage system as represented by NHIS. So the good news I have for you is that this has already taken place. In the pension arrangement now, the pension scheme regulator has come up with what it calls Fund 6. that allows any Nigerian and free of charge, no pension administrator should charge you a dime for requesting that your fund be moved, either from Fund 1, from 2, 3, majority of us are on Fund 4 anyway, that you want to move from Fund 4 or whatever to Fund 6. Fund 6 is that fund that will allow you to specify that I want my pension to be invested only in Sharia compliant businesses. That is possible today. And as the moderator rightly said, it has been more than a year that that has been in operation. So you can just approach your pension administrator and make that request. And I'm repeating that one. It is even free of charge. They shouldn't charge you any amount of money for moving. Now, the NHAIS, I also have very good news, although this may not be known to many because it's a recent development. The Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, that is in charge of our a contribution to the housing scheme. You know, by virtue of law, by law in the country, any employer must contribute about 2.5% or thereabout of your basic salary to that scheme. All we had in the past is that we only had a mortgage system that works only based on conventional system. But now, Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria has also come up with what it describes as Sharia compliant or non-interest mortgage system that I will also advise whoever is interested, the questionnaire and others, to maybe visit a Federal Mortgage Bank branch in your state or in your city, or even through their website and see more and more information. But this is also available today in the country. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. One more question, and it's going to be the last due to the time constraint. Jazakumullahu khairan, Prof. Alaro. Is it whose duty to make sure the primary legislation is enacted by the lawmakers, and who is responsible to stop taxation of non-permissible income?
The first leg of that question, can you come again? The first leg?
They say that whose duty is to make sure that the primary legislation is enacted by the lawmakers to avoid or to replace the subsidiary legislations that we are currently using.
Thank you. Who is responsible? Whose duty is it? I will simply put it as the stakeholders, all stakeholders. It is their duty to make sure this happens. You as a Nigerian, you are a stakeholder. You can go through your representative in the House of Rep, through the senator representing you to sponsor a private bill. It's not that difficult. Stakeholders, corporate bodies, banks, non-interest banks can form a group and see how they can go through any of our lawmakers. So in summary, the process of lawmaking in any nation can come through many channels. It's not only the government that will push the bills to the National Assembly. We have what we call private members bill, so that we can also be part of. And even the stakeholders, the regulators are also stakeholders, because they have an insight to what is happening better than others, better than even the legislators. They can tell them what is happening in other parts of the world as the best practice and advise them on the way forward. This is what I think should be done. The stakeholders generally have a duty, and you and I are part of those stakeholders. The second one, if you can remind me, please.
It's on the MPI, taxation, double taxation of MPI, taxation of MPI.
Whose duty is to stop that again?
Yes, yes.
Well, of course, it's the tax authority, FIRS and other tax authorities in the country. But again, I would say, they may not pay attention to this. They may not be doing it deliberately to harm the industry. It is incumbent on whoever knows, the insiders, the regulators, the operators, to find ways of drawing their attention to this and giving them what they can compare and see of how this form of banking is regulated and taxed in other parts of the world, that is making it to thrive and develop. So this is what I think should be done also in this respect.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this wonderful presentation and your attention for giving us the time to learn a lot from you. Actually, it is only because of the time. I know Prof has a lot to share with us, but the time will not permit. We thank you once again. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you in abundance and increase you in health and wealth. Thank you once again. There are so many questions that are not directly related to the presentation made by the Prof. Some are has to do with the banking operations. Some are asking the branches where, and I believe the secretariat of the bank is taking note of all this, and they will respond to some of these requests, inshallah, in due course. Now, and also there are other requests for the slides of all presentation. So inshallah, we're going to make it available after the presentation to all the participants. Before we move to the next presentation, we're going to take a brief and short commercial break for 1 or 2 minutes, inshallah. We are behind schedule time. Secretary, please, if you are ready, you have the floor. Thank you.
The Secretariat is giving you the permission to go ahead, please. Please go ahead, please.
Okay. And now the fourth presentation, which is going to be the last but not the least, is going to be presented by Mala Abdul Qadir Abbas, Director at the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is going to be on the nexus between Islamic banking and Islamic capital market in Nigeria. As just highlighted by Professor Alaro, that all these sectors are moving hand in hand. So this presentation is going to be made by Malam Abdul Qadir Abbas, who has been in the Islamic finance industry and has been one of the major proponents, particularly at the Capital Market Regulatory Authority. Before I call on Malam Abdul Qadir Abbas, let me briefly share his citation. Malam Abdul Qadir Abbas is a seasoned business administrator and capital market expert. He graduated with Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration in 1991 and obtained an MBA from Ahmadu Bello University Zaria in 2007. IFSC Malkan Institute Fellow in 2018. He was head of Securities and Investment Services Department from 2016 to 2021, Securities and Exchange Commission, having previously served as the divisional head fixed income and equities from 2012 to 2015. He has overseen the processing of application of the first ever global offering conducted by Seplat on an offer which was dual listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange, LSE. Other recent notable transactions include African Development Bank medium-term note program of 160 billion, IFC Nigerian bond, MNRC 140 billion medium-term note program, Lagos State 500 billion medium-term note program, and the first subnational spook issue of Osun State, among others. He is currently a director in charge of registration, exchanges, market infrastructure and innovation department at the Securities and Exchange Commission. His broad-based capital market experience, which goes back far to 1997, has seen himself in various strategic committees, such as the 10 Years Capital Market Master Plan Committee, Capital Market Committee, Subcommittee on Non-Interest Finance, Financial Services Regulation Coordinating Committee, Subcommittee on Financial Market, among others. He has attended various executive education programs on strategic topics, such as International Housing Finance and Securitization course, Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania, Structured Finance Training Capital Market Program, IFC Institute, University of USA, Securitization, Vinod Kotari, India, Fixed Income Securities, New York Institute of Finance, Leadership and Management, Lagos Business School, to mention but a few. Mala Abdul Qadir has been a proponent of Islamic finance, particularly at the capital market component, and has been invited to present so many papers at so many professional Islamic finance fora. Mala Abdul Qadir, you have the floor. You have 20 minutes as usual, and I hope you will be mindful of time, sir. You are welcome once again.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I think I really want to commend the organizers of this forum, Malam Hassan and his executive team, or Jaiz team in particular. I think, and again, just to say salam to Professor Ziad, my brother Maran Lere, and Professor Alaru. I think they have really done an excellent job. My own task is very simple. It's just to take us through very quickly in 20 minutes the nexus between Islamic banking and Islamic capital market in Nigeria. And I really, as I said, I want to really facilitate with Jaiz Bank for celebrating this 10-year anniversary. So I think without much ado, I will just go straight to the presentation. I think Professor Ziad has touched on some of these issues, so I will not really spend much time on it. If you look at the talking about the statistics, and based on the report of the Islamic Financial Services Board, what is the current trend? This is the report as at 2020, and we have the industry, the growth of the industry by 11.4% in 2019. And then you can see the kind of traction in terms of positive trajectory of Islamic finance generally. And when we talk about Islamic finance generally, I think we're talking about basically three segments, or divided into three segments. You talk about the Islamic banking, which I think a lot of discussion has been taken place. Amara Lere, Professor Alaro has touched on a lot of issues. Professor Ziad touched generally about the entire landscape as well. So we have the Takaful, and then we have the Islamic capital market. So my own focus is really about the Islamic capital market and what has been done so far, and what are the nexus really between the Islamic banking and Islamic capital market. And I think I really want to commend some of my, I can say the people that I can say principal actors. If I can talk about our former DG of SEC, Dr. Indanusa, I think he really played a lot of role, or a great role, when you talk about Islamic banking in Nigeria, or Islamic capital market rather. So in terms of what we have achieved so far, you can see a lot of developments have taken place. I think talking about the Islamic, the banking sector, what happened, three full-fledged Islamic banks, you talk about the Takaful. And then when we talk about the capital market, a lot of things happen and a lot of things are happening really. And you can really see the nexus in terms of the, what have we done? We have registered some Islamic fund managers, for instance. We came up with a lot of initiatives, Islamic Index, the Halal ETF, and even the Jaiz Bank that we're talking about today. I think I can say the capital market, or the Nigerian SEC, or Nigerian capital market, has really contributed. Before we even talk about the bank, I think we had what we call Jaiz International. I think we touch on that one. We talk about the issuances in terms of the product. We talk about the scoop that have been issued even before the sovereign, and then talking about the advisory council, or advisory board, which were actually leveraging on the first for now. And then the Takaful, they have their own council as well. So talking about the Islamic, the capital market ecosystem generally, we look at it from the entire perspective, from the product offering, talking about the activities in the market, talking about the market infrastructure, the exchanges, for instance. And they're talking about the regulation. When you talk about the regulation, definitely you talk about the SEC, because the regulation is the principal plank which all these issues reside, if I can put it in that context. So talking about the regulation, you talk about the governance, you talk about the securities law, you talk about the rules and regulation of the commission, you talk about even the exchanges, which are the SROs that we regulate, and we give them that status to actually come up with their own regulation as well. We have other market infrastructures that actually support activities in the Islamic capital market space. And you talk about the products, you talk about the equities, you talk about the scope, you talk about even some of these issues that Professor Ziad touched on, crowdfunding. And actually, we're happy to say that we have framework now from the SEC perspective to allow crowdfunding and to allow Sharia compliant crowdfunding as well. So when you talk about even the instruments, or the trading and the investment activities, investment advisories and all the parties or intermediaries that we have in the market, we essentially regulate them. And in particular, we regulate those ones that actually talk about, that really focus on Islamic capital market or Sharia compliant instrument, as it were. Now, in terms of the capital market, as I think I don't want to bore us much about what is Islamic capital market, are all those transaction, operation, and activities that are carried out that are consistent or in line with Sharia principle. That is really the bottom line. And I think we have clearly defined it in our regulation. And we talk about the scope, the requirement, and all the prohibited activities in that sense. So what are these nexus that we're talking about? Now, when you talk about Islamic banking, for instance, now the banks need capital market. Islamic bank needs capital market. As I said earlier, the Jaiz or the Taj Bank and the Lotus Bank, they really need the market to be able to even start their own operation. How do we even? I mean, what do you mean by that? The banking normally come up, before the capital market, but they need to get complementary services from the capital market for the bank to be able to really thrive, for them to be competitive, for them to be sustainable. And even the takaful companies as well. You talk about all the takaful, companies, our insurance compliant entities. When they mobilize these funds, why are they going to channel these funds? When the banks mobilize these funds, why are they going to channel it? They need to get an outlet or products that are appealing Sharia-wise, and capital market is really the destination. Even the paid-based consumers and all those ones that I was talking about excluded from the financial sectors because of ethical consideration. This is the way to address it, and that is why the capital market is really the way. It's like that is the destination for all these kind of activities to reside. Start from the banking, it will land in capital market. Start from the takaful, it will land to even the Fed base and even other demands that you can see from the market. You can be able to really leverage alternative funding, for instance. You can be able to get it from the capital market, and that is really the nexus. Because if without the capital market, nothing can really thrive. In terms of getting that kind of support or facilitation when you now talk about the banks or Islamic banking generally. Now, you can see even our own story, how we started. And this is really about the Jaiz and the other, what are the contribution of capital market to the Islamic banking in Nigeria? In 2004, capital market actually facilitated the formation of Jaiz Bank, as I said, because it used to be Jaiz PLC or Jaiz International PLC. So they now came to the market and they did what we call an initial public offering. As at that time, we didn't even have the rule to allow a company that doesn't have a track record to come and tap from the market. So we had to now, make an amendment to an existing regulation to allow this to happen. And that is the point that I was making earlier, that even the banking started actually, Jaiz Bank actually started from the capital market. And the success of that offer really give the Jaiz International the desired impetus to even approach CBN for banking license. And subsequent to that, a lot of offers, took place, private placements, and they were very much well received, oversubscribed. And you can see it cut across the, various categories of investors. And that was even the time when there was a lot of, issues about, Islamic banking is, but even before then, and I think I'll touch on that very briefly, what we have done as SEC. So we make our rules, we make the existing rules, we make some amendment to existing rule to allow this kind of transaction. Even of recent, a Taj Bank, approaches the market or approaches the SEC to issue a scoop, and it was recently approved. So far we have about, 4 corporate scoop worth about 60 billion. And this is to show you that there is really a nexus between the capital market and the banking. There's no way you can be able to have, a kind of a market that you can say is an investment destination if the two didn't really have a handshake. And that is really the handshake that we had in this respect. And then this is how it started. We joined an ISCO. ISCO is an international organization of securities regulators worldwide. So the SEC joined in 2004. It joined a committee that is called Islamic Capital Market Committee, formed by ISCO. That is really what gives us the impetus to even start to regulate this sector of the market. And then in 2008, we had Islamic Mutual Fund. And 2010, something very strange happened. We came up with a rule that we call Islamic Fund Management. That was before even the central bank came up with the license of the or their own regulation. You know, and in 2012, you know, Nigerian Stock Exchange launches what you call Lotus Islamic Index as at that time. So these are really good traction. And then 2013, that was when we even had the first national sukuk, sovereign sukuk issued by Osun State. As at that time, again, we didn't have the sovereign. Sovereign sukuk was not in existence. But we have to now come up with a regulation in 2013 to allow this kind of transaction to happen. Again, who are the investors? The banks and the mutual fund, Sharia compliant mutual fund that mobilizes money are the one that actually invested among other investors. And in 2014, we had the Lotus Halal Fund and the ETFs as well. In 2015, just to now trace the nexus again, we recognize that there is need at the SEC to come up with a 10-year master plan. Part of a segment of that master plan, we're saying that 25% of our projection by 2025 should come from, you know, non-interest capital market segment. And that is why we need to encourage the banks, we need to encourage other Sharia compliant mutual funds to come in on board so that we can be able to achieve this target, very laudable target to build a strong regulation. So we started with all these key objectives or critical objectives, strategic objective. And we're able to say we have really achieved a good milestone in terms of initiative that we have implemented. These are quite a number of initiatives. We come up with a kind of collaborative initiative between central bank, the SEC, the PENCOM, you know, in particular, to be able, and even the tax authorities that I think Professor touched about. We have that harmonization, and this is really what we're able to achieve, you know, in this, record time. And in terms of the prime recommendation, you can see that we're able to really, collaborate even before with PENCOM to be able to come up with all this with their own guidelines, and even the issue around liquidity status, you know, of non-interest capital market instruments. We have approached CBN on that, and we're still having a discussion with central bank and DMO around that issue. Then we issue a lot of, guidelines on Sharia governance, and just to provide a kind of level playing field, you know, and then issue around tax that I think Professor touched on, just to provide clarity. And we facilitate creation of commodities. Now we have about 5 commodity exchanges. Most of them are looking into, issuing Sharia compliant instrument along that. And I think that's why we want to encourage the likes of Jaiz Bank, Taj Bank we are challenging them to come up with a kind of product that will be appealing to this kind of exchanges, Sharia-wise. And then partnering on investor education, the issuances, even by the sovereign sukuk, we actually collaborated with DMO before they even came up with the first one that they issued. We have been on that issue because we wanted the sovereign to actually come initially before the subnational and corporate, so that it can serve as the yield curve, and it can create the yield curve and the benchmark, so that other corporate can actually drive on that. But unfortunately, the subnational came up before the sovereign. But we are really happy to have sovereign coming up, and they should be encouraged to have a kind of calendar of issuances, so that we can develop the yield curve and the benchmark that we wanted. I think on the listing, I think it is really quite, all the exchanges have listing rules which we have approved for listing of this kind of instrument. 2016, 2017, I think we can see a kind of traction in terms of what we have done, even on the REITs, that we have even approved Islamic REITs, in our own, in our own space, just to encourage a lot of issuances in this field. So in terms of opportunities, I think there are a lot of great opportunities. I don't want to really bore us. I think most of us will know the opportunities. We know that really we're just like scratching the surface. We need to have the right environment. We need to really see how we can encourage a lot of innovation in Islamic finance, in Islamic capital market, Islamic banking, Islamic takaful. And then in conclusion, what do we need to do? We should continue, embrace and develop, continue to collaborate with all stakeholders to foster partnership in terms of capacity building. This is all across the market stakeholders. I embrace digitalization, which is our innovative product. I think Professor Ziad touched on this, such as crowdfunding, robo-advisory. I think we have a lot. And even on digital space, we have issued our rules on digital asset. And this one is open to both conventional and Islamic capital market operators or issuers, or anyone that is interested, and then develop a dynamic, transparent, and efficient market where both the banking and the capital market can thrive in a very in a more convenient and Sharia compliant way. I think I will stop here. I believe my 20 minutes is up. Thank you, moderator, for giving us the opportunity. Again, I want to really commend Jaiz Bank for this opportunity, and I want to really thank all of us for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much for this timely presentation, because you even left about 40 seconds to the moderator. Thank you very much. And we are running out of time. And I think we're going to take some of the questions. Somebody was asking, sir, can you shed more light on the recently released guidelines, draft exposure for the Sharia advisors?
Thank you. Yes. I think I was rushing because I don't want to bore us. That's why I say we're doing a lot more. So it's still part of what we have been doing to really deepen further the non-interest segment of the market. That rule is exposed for market comment, and this is how we actually normally come up with our rules. And that rule essentially is to register anybody that has the qualification to now practice or to now be given certification on any of the capital market products, Sharia certification. And our rule has provided that, let's say if you issue a school, the rule provided that that school should be recertified, through every year, throughout the tenure of that school. And what we have seen in the market, we have seen a lot of people coming to SEC to say they want to just partake in a transaction as Sharia advisors. And we think there is need for decorum. It's not anybody that would just come and just be given certification. So we have stipulated the requirement. And this rule that we did, we actually benchmark against certain jurisdictions, Malaysia in particular. And the essence is really to come up with a framework that will enable anybody that has this qualification to come and get registered. So you'll be in our net. So if there's anything that you do which is contrary, we can deregister you and you will not be allowed to partake in any transaction. So the whole idea is the rule has made provision for individual Sharia advisors to come and get registration, so that registration will now give you the license to operate in the capital market space in Nigeria and to be given fatwa Sharia wise, and it will now be subject to what we will now send to press for press to now review and then say, yes, this instrument is fine. So that is how we frame the rules. So it has been exposed for 2 weeks and we're seeking for comment from the market. The whole idea is that we'll take comment on board and then we'll finalize it, then it will now become rule that will become operational for the capital market, for any activity in the capital market for that matter, if you want to be a Sharia advisor.
Okay, thank you. I think this is the same way that on the Sharia supervisory services, advisory services, somebody was saying that can an individual register as an independent Sharia advisor, or must every fund manager or stockbroker employ the services of Sharia advisor or not? Is it going to be on temporary level or on permanent basis? So these are okay, fine. So the issue is, if you are a fund manager, for instance, you have a Sharia compliant fund. The rule provides that you need to have a Sharia advisor. So you have your own Sharia advisory committee or board that will now be looking at the fund and be certifying it and be ensure that yes, it is in compliance with the requirement of the Sharia. Now, if you are a broker, for instance, and you want to venture into activities that are Sharia compliant, you engage a Sharia advisor. He reviewed that activity or that proposal and give a kind of certification. The certification will now be sent to the SEC. SEC will review, and SEC will now seek further a kind of second level review from the press. And if the press is satisfied with it, then we are fine with that. So you can be an individual Sharia advisor for a fund, for a broker. And if there is need for the broker to engage you on case-by-case basis, he can engage you. The most important thing is that for any activity that you intend to do or any proposal, there must be a certification. But for a fund manager, for instance, you need to have a Sharia council or committee or a committee, as the case may be.
So if you have that one, because you are operating a halal fund, for instance, Lotus Capital, for instance, all the activities revolve around Sharia compliant activities, and they have a Sharia, committee or advisory committee. So if they have now conformed with that, rule or qualification as per the rule, then we just recognize that one, and then they will continue with their operation.
Thank you very much. The last question, somebody asking that the SEC rules provides for Sharia Advisory Council for SEC, but it appears SEC refers to the phrase on that. Is it lack of manpower or what? That's interesting. How do you respond?
That's quite interesting, really. Okay, I think let me just try to, say something around the phrase. The whole idea, if I could remember, for setting up the press is actually to serve the entire, industry, financial industry, even though it is actually championed by central bank. I could remember we were part of the committee that came up with a report, JCAB report, and part of the recommendation is that there is need for a central body, and that is how it came up. Yes, in our own, master plan, there is a provision for SEC to come up with its own Sharia Advisory Council, which the Commission is still looking into that as well. But for now, what is currently happening is that we leverage on the phrase to be able to now recertify an initial certification of the in-house operators that have filed an application for approval of the SEC. So it's not really about lack of manpower per se, if I can say it that way, but we wanted to start and see how things evolve. And then if there is need for the SEC to now come up with its own, as I said, it is actually part of that plan. SEC could consider, coming up with its own, similar to what NICOM have done. But if we decide to say, okay, let's have a central body, we can have the central body. So many jurisdictions have that central body. But for instance, in Malaysia, for instance, Bank Negara has their own, its own Sharia, council, and then the SC Malaysia has its own council too. So this is one of the proposals that I think is on the table. A decision has not been taken yet, but it's something that is the SEC is looking onto. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, this could have been a very good plan if it will be effected, because it will be a stepping ground for building manpower and capacity building, as well as mentoring the younger generation of scholars to be educated by the already established ones. So we look forward towards actualization of this initiative. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking your time and buttressing on this important issue. Indeed, the nexus between the capital market and the banking sector will not be overemphasized, because they go hand in hand. As he has just highlighted, even the Jaiz Bank, as the pioneer non-interest bank in the country, started from the capital market when it was placed for the initial public offer, and today it is the leading non-interest banking bank in the country. So also other instruments that are required in the capital market, they are the ones that support the banking industry as well as other companies. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you. Just if you can just allow me to just say just one issue with respect to this. The SEC is even currently planning to have a session on Sharia, training on Sharia scholars. This is part of the effort that we're actually making to see that we have more scholars in the market. So we have a plan program, and I think it very soon it will be circulated on our website, so that if anyone is interested can join. It's just a forum to train for about some days, and then we intend to do it in modules, module 1, module 2, module 3. That's just an additional input that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this important information, and I believe participants will benefit from it, and we wait to see the release of the detail of the intended program. And now we're coming to an end of the program. This has been the last presentation by Malam Abdul Qadir Abbas, the Director at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Before we take the closing remark, by Mala Ahmad Hassan, Executive Director Services and the Chief Financial Officer of Jaiz Bank. I would like to invite the technical team of the webinar for a short commercial break for 1 or 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
I say one thing, congratulations for paving the way. But it's a never-ending journey. As soon as you reach one hill, it's like climbing Mount Everest. As soon as you hit one peak, you realize there are many more ahead of you.
And it gives me great pleasure being the person who signed the license for this bank. There are many stories around that, but I'm sure you all know I've completed my book on my 5 years in the central bank, and there's a whole chapter on Islamic finance and Jaiz. So all the details will be set out there.
Jaiz, as a non-interest bank, goes beyond making profits, but rather covers the inclusive creation of value for the economy and society. Over the course of the first 10 years of our existence, we have consistently aligned our operations with our vision of making life better for all our stakeholders.
Okay, thank you very much, the technical team from the Secretariat. Now we are going to the last item on the program, which is closing remark by Malam Ahmad Hassan, Executive Director Services and the Chief Financial Officer of Jaiz Bank. Malam Ahmad, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Ahmed Hassan, the Executive Director.
Kindly unmute yourself, sir. You are not being heard.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
It seems there are 2 devices that are on. Okay. Kindly unmute or off the first one of them so that you can concentrate on one. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Okay. My name is Ahmed Hassan, the ED Services and Chief Financial Officer, as earlier introduced. I wish to, on behalf of the management of the bank, sincerely thank all the participants and particularly the presenters, paper presenters on this program. Our special thanks go to Professor Alaro, Professor Ziad, Alaji Lere, Alaji Abbas. We've had quite a lot, very educative perspectives about Islamic finance. We've also heard about the historical development and the initial promoters of Islamic finance in Nigeria. May Allah reward everybody. I'm sure the participants have gotten more insights into the historical development of Islamic finance, the efforts made by certain individuals to establish and promote Islamic finance. The efforts also made by the regulators from the beginning. We are very grateful to that. And the efforts that the regulators are also making continuously to fine-tune the Islamic finance in Nigeria through issuance of guidelines and circulars. We are grateful to that, but we also want to continue. We will also continue to engage the regulators and other stakeholders in the industry so that more regulations and frameworks that addresses the peculiarities of Islamic banking in Nigeria come up. We'll continue to educate our regulators on the need to differentiate when circulars are being issued out to take our the peculiarities of Islamic banks in Nigeria. We also heard that the NSE is trying to organize a seminar, a workshop, or a training program for Islamic finance. We'll wait for the details. Inshallah, we will participate very actively in that so that we can fine-tune what we do, come up with new products that are Sharia compliant, and do so many other things that actually will promote Islamic banking in Nigeria. So on this note, I would want to thank you all for the participation, for the contributions, for the questions and answers that have been discussed. More particularly, as I have said, our special thanks go to the paper presenters, Professor Alaro. We thank you sincerely. You know, you have been a great assistance to us. Whenever we have issues, we ask for explanations. You are always there for us. Professor Ziyad, at the initial stage, when the bank was about taking off, and even when we took off, we have gotten quite useful advices from you. Alhaji Leri, I know the words we don't have words to really use here because we know the difficulties you passed through at CBN before we were able to get the license of doing Islamic banking in Nigeria. Alhaji Abbas, we thank you sincerely from the capital market point of view. So thank you, everybody. Thank on behalf of management and staff of the bank. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Malam Ahmed Hassan, the Executive Director Services and Chief Financial Officer of Jaiz Bank, for this remarkable closing remark and vote of thanks as well. All participants, all the resource persons and presenters, our able Sheikh and Assistant Professor, Dr. Muhammad Ziyad, our able Prof, Dr. Professor Alaro, our able Malam Wadalere, Malam Abdul Qadir, Abbas, and all other people that are behind the scene who made this webinar successful. On behalf of Jaiz Bank and the supporting partners, Anuti Ethical Consulting and the IFING Media, I want to once again thank you for your time and for honoring this event. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all and sundry in abundance. Lastly, I'm going to call on Dr. Warshu Tijani Rabiu from the International Institute of Islamic Banking and Finance, Bayero University, Kano, to offer us a closing prayer. Dr. Warshu Tijani Rabiu.
Now, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you, Prof, for the opportunity. I think I've become speechless to find the suitable words to describe this webinar. We have been enlightened, and the deliberations are really going to take the the industry further. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to strengthen this path, struggle we are doing, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all this effort and bless it, and we get the reward for it here in this world and get it in our accounts in the al-akhirah. اللهم اجعل اجتماعنا هذا اجتماعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا معنا شقيا ولا محروما. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. اللهم أحسن عاقبتنا في الأمور كلها وأجرنا من خزي الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. آمين يا رب العالمين. Thank you very much. That has been the end of this 10th year anniversary webinar organized by Jaiz Bank in collaboration with Anuti Ethical Consulting and IFING Media Limited. Thank you very much. I congratulate Jaiz Bank for once again for its 10th year anniversary. And now we're going to take another commercial break, which will be the exit point for the webinar. Thank you very much once again.
Oh, wow. Okay. Entertainment and reflection. As Jaiz, the first full-flag Islamic bank in Nigeria, operating under Islamic banking principles, and a non-interest bank, celebrated a decade of achievements. 10 years and still counting, Jaiz Bank has remained strong and committed to the Nigerian financial industry through flexible financial policies.
It gives me great pleasure being the person who signed the license for this bank. And I'm sure we all agree that the financial system in Nigeria is better off. It's more diversified, it has more options. And that was the beginning of a number of steps. We've had Islamic funds, we've had Sukuk, we've now had other Islamic banks set up, and I do hope that this sector will grow from strength to strength.
One of the key things about being a pioneer is that you end up training most of the staff for your follow-on competitors. At the same time, you are what strategists call having a first mover advantage.
Being the first to premier non-interest banking in the country, it has established on the foundation of trust, professionalism, and excellence to deliver innovative financial solutions and exceptional customer experience. These principles, the management of the financial institution says, are core values which have empowered the bank to project its vision to be the leader in ethical banking in sub-Saharan Africa.
And I'm sure you are aware of the various difficulties and problems that we encountered in the way. Capitalization issue, when we raised the 2.5 billion from public issue, when the shareholding of a bank at that time was 2 billion, the central bank came up with a decision that any bank that has to be created will have to have a capitalization of 25 billion naira. So we have to go back to the drawing board again to see how we can mitigate that particular problem.
As we commemorate this decade of our existence, it is a moment to reflect on our past, but also to look ahead to the future. And as we do so, our focus is clear: to create long-term sustainable value for all stakeholders for many years to come.
I'm also honored to be launching the IFS BI report, Financial Stability Report for 2022. And this report is coming at a very important time for the global economy.
Amidst whining and dining, customers and staff who have contributed to the growth of the bank were honored.
Will be you driven, yes you, because you are Nigeria's biggest capital, greatest asset.
The bank also recently announced at its 2022 annual general meeting a 4 kobo per share dividend for the year 2022, with expectation to raise the capital of 150 billion naira through issuance of sukuk, either in full or serially.
The next stage, we are now going to look at another 5 to 10 year strategy, one of which will be to see ways and means of how we can progress from a single bank, a standalone bank, to a holdco, which means the company will have, a holdco company will have, among other things, the bank and many other different types of businesses coming under the holdco arrangement.
We will do much more into the areas of fintech, into the areas of takaful insurance, and many more. So we will diversify the offerings so that our customers will have what we can say complementary service, financial services.
Jaiz Bank was incorporated as a public limited liability company in 2003 and obtained a regional banking license to operate as a non-interest bank in 2011 to deliver innovative financial solutions and exceptional customer experience.